Welcome everyone. Welcome respected teachers and esteemed professionals. It is our hope to present to you a step-by-step procedure to publishing with an academic publishing house, offering guidance to future authors wishing to publish in the English language with Cambridge Scholars Publishing. The webinar is developed in association with Inspiri's educational group as a part of our mission to create bridge between China and the world, sharing the wealth of knowledge and wisdom for the advancement of humanity. My name is Mary. I'm a product presenter for educational publishing. I have 2 decades of experience in the publishing industry with credentials such as Pearson Education, John Wiley and Sons, McGraw-Hill Education, and so forth. My colleague David Yang and Yi Chen will support you during the session.
Great. Okay. Shall I pick up, Mary?
Yes. And now we welcome Mr. John Peters.
Lovely. Hello, everyone. My name's John. I am a publisher by profession. I work at the moment with quite a lot with Cambridge Scholars Publishing. My background, again, like Mary, I've spent too long in publishing to remember. So it's a lot of time with Emerald Journals publishers in the UK, with Taylor and Francis Routledge, Greenleaf Publishing, and others. So I'm going to talk to you today, and I'm going to share my screen about from beginning, come on, about submitting and publishing a scholarly academic book. So as Mary said, if you have questions, if you can note them on the chat box, and we'll have some time afterwards to address some of them, and we'll have some time offline afterwards to address more of them. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, great. Okay, so what do we mean by an academic book? It's based on research, so it's not anecdote or opinion. It tends to have a more formal style, so it gets read by researchers and students for research and study, not really by the general public like we might read a novel. It's not normally a memoir or a personal history. There is an emerging area called autoethnography, which is a sort of memoir but done in an academic style. It's more likely to take a long view, and it's more likely focused around a single subject or topic. So if you think about, reading your favorite newspaper or magazine, you'll have articles on politics or sport or the weather or arts, but an academic book might be only politics or only arts. It's normally about 60 to 150,000 words, maybe slightly longer or shorter, but that's typically the sort of scope for an academic book. And there are a number of different types of academic book. So what do we have? What we call a monograph, which is normally single topic, written by an author or a number of authors. An edited collection, which is put together by an editor. It contains a number of chapters. The chapters are normally about the length of a journal article, so about 5,000 words. And it's typically around a theme. So again, bear in mind, an academic book isn't normally just a sort of collection of pieces on different themes. It's normally around a theme from various authors, could be authors from around the world, collected and put into order by an editor or editors. And the editor or editors will normally write an introduction which kind of links everything together. We have textbooks and reference books, or text reference books as we call them, normally linked to a study course. So we can have an economics textbook, a biology textbook, a marketing textbook. The author, Philip Kotler from Northwestern University in Illinois, wrote the definitive marketing textbook, I think back in the 70s, I certainly used it in my MBA. In the 80s, other people have used it. I think I saw Kotler present once, and he said he's been living very happily off the royalties from his marketing textbook ever since. You can have a book derived from a PhD thesis, which is normally a monograph, or a book derived from a conference, which is normally an edited collection. So if you think about conference papers, they're a really interesting way of creating a book. They're in a sense already peer reviewed, as of course as a PhD thesis, because you've been through with your examiner. So it's already had a level of peer review to begin with. So we're quite interested in books which are adapted from a PhD or adapted from a conference. Normally books deal with arts, humanities, and social sciences. Journals mostly deal with sciences, with life, health, physical sciences. So you really think of books as a sort of natural medium for arts, humanities, and social sciences. Of course, we have books on sciences and we have journals on arts and humanities, but most academic books tend to be presented around arts, humanities, and social science. So why would we write or edit an academic book? You can reach a wider audience. Even quite a specialist academic book is more likely to be read, if not in whole, at least in parts, than an academic article. We used to say back in my journals publishing days that a typical article is read on average 1.8 times, and that does include the author. So an academic article, even a very sort of, unless you've got a very, very influential one, an academic article tends not to be read very much. An academic book quite often is. You can do it for career advancement. So again, coming back to arts, humanities, and social sciences, it's very much the way that you say, this is my area, this is how this is what I want to create awareness of myself in as an academic. You can do it for professional advancement. It's a fantastic way to build a reputation as an expert or a consultant. When I was with Greenleaf Publishing, we had an author who did a lot of work with some of the food distribution companies, and he published 2 or 3 books with us, and he would buy hundreds of copies, and he'd give them, well, he'd actually sell them to his consulting clients. So he would use that to build his reputation as a professional consultant. It's a good way of developing an idea. So with a book, you've got scope to go very deeply into a field, or to address kind of around a number of fields, and more so than an article. And do you write an academic book to make money? Well, coming back to Philip Kotler, yes, maybe, but most people do not, I'm afraid. Academic book sales are relatively small. They typically go into libraries and they sell in their hundreds, not their thousands, or not their tens of thousands. But they can help you get speaking engagements. They can help you get consulting engagements. They can help you with your career progression as an academic. So you're not likely to make money directly out of your academic book, but it can help you. It can help you develop if that's what you're interested in. Okay, so far. Let me talk a little bit about Cambridge Scholars Publishing, who are kind of our, along with Inspiries, who are our hosts today. And I see we have Jamie and Rebecca from Cambridge Scholars. Hi, guys. So Cambridge Scholars Publishing, founded in 2001, so it's 20 years old this year, in Cambridge, hence the name. And it moved up to Newcastle upon Tyne in the north of England a few years later. So although it's called Cambridge Scholars, it's actually based in Newcastle in the north. It's an academic book publisher, mostly the areas of humanities and social sciences, but recently has diversified into science titles, so certainly will consider science titles. It's a small company with quite a large output, so about 700 new titles a year, and it's growing. Maybe 5 to 10% we estimated are, I mentioned before about adapted PhDs and adapted conference proceedings, maybe between 5 and 10% would come from adapted PhDs, and another 5 to 10% from edited collections adapted from conference proceedings. So once again, it's these are good ways, interesting ways of sourcing quite high quality books. PhDs obviously typically are quite often first-time authors, so these are newer scholars. So these are good people for a publisher to get on board, because they it helps you build a relationship with them as they build through their academic career. Probably 10% in all come from, 10 to 15% come from PhDs and conferences. The rest of them submitted monographs and edited collections. And why would you want to publish with Cambridge Scholars? I think for really a number of reasons. Cambridge Scholars take a deliberately inclusive and diverse approach. So a lot of the things, a lot of times, certainly in the journals world, we used to talk about being exclusive, and we used to talk about rejection rates. And we used to say that a good journal had a very high rejection rate. So anybody who wanted to get in to be published in the journal, we would say, no, you can't be published, because it's only for the elite scholars. Cambridge Scholars take a kind of different approach, really. They say, we'll try and welcome people in to the body of knowledge where we can, and we'll take a decision to publish based on academic merit and not really on anything else. So there's no charges to publish. Cambridge Scholars don't charge any money to publish their books. It's a pretty quick and hopefully constructive review process. So they work on the basis of about a 30-day turnaround on a proposal review. So about a month after submitting a proposal, you should hear whether Cambridge Scholars will accept the proposal, or whether it will ask for some revisions, or whether it won't be able to publish. CSP take multidisciplinary titles and look at crossover titles, which look at humanities, social sciences, science, technology, education, mathematics. They publish in library hardback form with an ebook and paperback option. So everything gets published in hardback, everything gets published as an ebook. Sometimes there is an option to be published in paperback. That's normally after a delay. Cambridge Scholars operates an unusual nowadays option, which is in-house printing and distribution, which means your book is never out of stock. The print files are held at the Cambridge Scholars head office. So as soon as stocks get low, they get replenished. So you're never out of stock. They work with a worldwide group of academic distribution partners. So all the people you would expect, Amazon, Inspiries, of course, EBSCO and ProQuest in the States, Gardeners and others. As an author with CSP, you can have the option to apply to join an advisory board. Cambridge Scholars Cambridge Scholars have advisory boards which represent them in a number of subjects, and authors have the opportunity to apply to be an advisor as well as an author. So there's some reasons to publish with CSP. And let me take you quickly through how that process works. So step one, and you've got some links on here as well, complete a proposal. everyone completes a proposal form, and that just allows authors to set down their thoughts in a very programmatic system. It says, what's your book? What's it about? How many words? When will it be finished? What are some of the chapters? What's the table of contents? Who in this area might review the book? What else has been published in the field? What courses are there? What conferences are there, etc. So just looking at some, it's a very, very standard approach by a book publisher. The proposal gets reviewed. So we always ask for a summary. We ask for sample chapters, and we ask for an author's history, an author's CV or resume. You'll be asked for a likely date of completion. So we'll say, we'll say, when do you expect to complete? You might say, oh, I'll complete in 12 months' time. And during that time, your commissioning editor, so one of Rebecca's team, will be in touch with you while you're working through and finishing the book. When your book comes in, it'll be proofed, and you'll have the opportunity to make some corrections. Assuming everything is okay, you'll be asked to choose a cover, or CSP will choose a cover for you. It'll be formatted for publication, and you'll have a final check, and then it'll be published, printed, and listed on the website. So that's briefly how we run through the publication process. Cambridge Scholars publish in, as I've said, largely in the arts, humanities and social sciences, so language and linguistics, history, political science, art and culture, philosophy, architecture, built environment, literature, criticism, also physical science, also health science, also life sciences, with a strong portfolio in relating to China and Southeast Asia as well. So let me tell you about some of those. We've got a couple of selected books here that that we've published in recent years. China Beyond the Binary, which is Kate Rose, and I will probably mess up the pronunciation there, from the China University of Mining and Technology, and Inertia of History from Tsinghua, from Hangshu Normal, and also rethinking the medical reform in, medical education reform, from authors, which from the Duke Kunshan, which is a partnership between Duke University in the States and Wuhan. Some nice articles from and about China. We publish in English, so all the books are English language, but we have, as I said, quite a strong collection in from China and Southeast Asia. As I said before, our hosts today are Cambridge Scholars and Inspiries. This is a partnership that goes back to 2007, so a long way back, between CSP and Inspiries. And Inspiries, broadly speaking, support CSP in sales and representation, support Cambridge Scholars in helping to find authors, and offer a representative office in Beijing and a representation in mainland China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. So it's a good, solid, strong, friendly relationship between the two organizations. So what do we do to submit a proposal, and what might that mean? Well, here's 3 things to look for, 3 things that we would look for, and 4 things that we don't really look for. Again, this is a link if anybody wants to look at the Cambridge Scholars site, and the book proposal form. So books need to be in the English language. They can be translated from, they can be translations as long as we have permission to do that. They need to be broadly academic because Cambridge Scholars is an academic publisher. They can be on any academic subject. What we don't do is publish other languages. So obviously, if there is a section of a book, if there are footnotes to a book or quotations in a Chinese language or in French or Spanish, that's absolutely fine. But we don't publish in other languages. We don't publish journals, just not our field. We don't publish fiction, and we don't publish memoir. So typically, quite a lot of the time when a title gets rejected, it's because they don't fit that scope. We get proposals that say, I've written an interesting fictional book, or I've written a memoir, or I've written something in French. And we say, well, that's great, but it doesn't fit our scope. So when we talk about review, let's look at what reviewers will look for in a book proposal. Most important thing as an author, I think you can say, is what's the purpose and value. So what's going to be useful about this book to a fellow scholar, to another academic, to a researcher, to a student. So why am I, answer the question, why am I writing this book? A book should have a good title. What does a good title mean? A good title means it's about, the book is, the title describes the book. This is so important, and it's an area where we have to do quite a lot of corrections and give authors feedback. If you're, got a book in front of me here, Organizational Downsizing, it's not a Cambridge Scholars one, Organizational Downsizing, Discrimination and Corporate Social Responsibility, says what the book's about. If that title was sort of a bad time in an organization, doesn't tell you what the book's about. So a title should tell you what's in the book. This is really important for what we call discoverability, how you find a book, how a researcher finds a book, how a librarian categorizes a book. So always think about a nice, short, descriptive title for your book. And the title doesn't have to be clever, it doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to be, what's this about? Originality and points of difference. It's a specific question we ask in the proposal form. Why this book, and how does it differ from other titles in the field? So if you're writing a book, if you're writing an economics textbook, what's new about it? What's different about it? So it shows that also you know your field as an author, so you should be able to say, you know, here are other books which deal in a similar area, but mine is different because. A proposal should be relevant to existing knowledge, and it should extend existing knowledge. So it should push existing knowledge a little bit further and demonstrate how it does that. The proposal should demonstrate how the research for the book has been done or will be done. So are the conclusions that the book is coming to valid and objective? You should be able to say in a proposal, what are the research implications? And if appropriate, what are the practice implications? So how will it contribute to helping future researchers? How might it contribute to practice and practitioners? You should be able to demonstrate in a proposal your clarity and structure and quality of writing. Most important thing you can do in academic publishing is communicate. And if your writing is not clear and doesn't communicate well, you're not going to have the impacts that you should have. it should demonstrate the recency and the relevance of the references. So we do sometimes see somebody who says, well, this was some research that I did in the 1990s. Can you publish this for me? If it's research that was done in the 1990s, that is still valid and that has been updated and refreshed and has got some new references, that might be absolutely fine. If it's only got references from the 1990s, then it probably isn't. So we look for a recency and relevance of references. And finally on the list, reviewers will look for how well the author knows their audience. So it can be very, very specific. If it's a book about downsizing and corporate social responsibility, the audience might be researchers in corporate social responsibility and in organizational design. It's really not helpful when authors say, "Oh, everybody will get value from this book." Everybody isn't a good answer. We don't look for very wide, we look for quite narrow and specialized. So if you think about those questions, those are some good questions to keep in mind when you're putting a proposal together, and that will help our reviewers take a good view of your proposal. Not all proposals get accepted. So why do they get rejected for an academic book? And this is the case for Cambridge Scholars, but it's the case for any really any academic book publisher. A personal reminiscence or a memoir, it can be fantastically interesting. We get some wonderful proposals through. Somebody who's spent 40 years in nuclear submarines and has traveled all over and sailed under the North Pole and had all sorts of interesting life adventures. But it's not an academic book. So a personal reminiscence or a memoir, however interesting, isn't normally appropriate for an academic book. A new scientific or medical theory. We get some very, very interesting proposals. Somebody has come up with a new theory of gravity. Somebody has come up with a cure for coronavirus. And normally what we would say is a new scientific or medical breakthrough would always be published first in a peer-reviewed journal. That's the place for scientific breakthrough. So if it's been published in, if a new theory of gravity has been published in Nature and reputable physics journals, and then has got permission to be republished in a book, we'd be very happy with it. But if it's something that hasn't been published first in a peer-reviewed journal, we can't touch it as a book publisher, and no reputable book publisher ever would. So new science isn't the right medium for a scholarly book. Promoting a political or religious viewpoints. Politics and religion are fine subjects for scholarly books, and of course there are departments of and students of politics and departments and students of religion. But promoting a particular viewpoint doesn't work as an academic book. And that's not a question of whether we as publishers or our reviewers agree or disagree with the viewpoint. It's just that it's not, opinion isn't scholarly research. So that will be a reason for rejection. As I've mentioned before, nothing new is a good reason. So if we get a book on leadership, we have to say to ourselves, why is this different from all the hundreds of books on leadership? So my advice to you as authors is, if you're writing a book on leadership, give us a nice, interesting, different angle. What is leadership in a developing world nation? What does leadership in a hospital look like? What can leaders learn from musicians? What can leaders learn from football teams? I don't know. So just give us a different view of a general subject. And finally, again, coming back to communication, as an English language publisher, if English isn't your first language, or you don't have a strong command of the English language, that's okay. But think about a co-author or think about a translator, because if it doesn't communicate in English well, we really won't be able to publish it. So those are really 5 sort of major areas of rejection. But other than that, books can be very specialized. They can be a very niche audience. And again, we will take a view that if they are academically credible, we will publish them at our risk, so there won't be any charge for publication, and we'll take a chance with them. So good scholarship is the most important thing. Before you submit your book, this is something we used to say in journals publishing. Before it goes for external peer review, do your own peer review. And your own peer review doesn't involve you reading it, it involves somebody else reading it. So find a peer, find a friend, find a colleague, and say, I'm going to submit this proposal, or my manuscript is now ready for submission to my publisher. Will you have a look, please? And ask for honest opinion and feedback. We are way too close to our own work to see failings. I'm no different. If I'm looking to do something like this, I'll get colleagues or friends to take a look first. Please take the same care over submitting a book that you would ask from your students, or if you are a student, that you would do when you were submitting a master's thesis or a PhD. Don't send it in full of errors. Don't send it in with incomplete references. We've got now tools that say that give you a spell check and grammar check. So as well as reading it through carefully, use those tools. We should really never have a submitted manuscript nowadays that has spelling errors. Just like, if you're a PhD, if you're submitting for a PhD, your PhD thesis shouldn't have spelling errors in. Or grammar errors. It might have 1 or 2, but it shouldn't really, because we've got the technology and the tools to fix that. So take the same care when you're submitting a book manuscript, a proposal, or indeed, as I've said before, this works for journals as well. If you're submitting a journal article, as you would ask your students to do. We do an element of proof check. We don't do extensive copy editing or language editing. If you need language editing, you will need to make your own arrangements. One of the reasons that Cambridge Scholars is able to publish quite a high output and to take a chance on books that don't necessarily that are quite specialized is because we take quite a light touch approach. We ask our authors to sort of preserve their own voice, but we can't do copy editing and we can't do language editing. Otherwise, our cost base will be so high, we could only afford to publish a very few quite exclusive potential high sales books. So you need to make your own arrangements. And we, of course, can help with that. So we can provide, we can recommend approved editors. Any engagement of those editors is entirely between the author and the external editor. So we don't handle that transaction at all. We can just say, you might want to approach this person. I know Mary's going to talk a little bit about permissions, but let me say a few words on permissions as well. It's absolutely normal to include a previously published article, chapter, table, or section, but you need to have permission. We welcome English language versions of books which have been previously published in another language, but you need to have permission. So if we publish a book and you want to reuse a part of that, you should ask us, and we'll normally say yes. And that's the same as when you publish a journal article or a book in another language or with another publisher. If it's been published previously by a publisher, you need permission. If it's been published by yourself, it's been published on your website, it's been published as a free download self-published book on Amazon Kindle, you don't need permission because you effectively are the publisher. But if it's being published by a publisher, you need to get permission. And you need to tell us that this has been required. We don't source permissions on authors' behalves. And something to remember as an author, it's always your, what we call IP. It's always your intellectual property. So your book belongs to you, but the published version of your book belongs to the publisher. And that's a sort of, it's a sort of interesting difference. But if you think about it, the ideas in your book are yours, but the final published printed ebook format belongs to the publisher. So if you can't obtain permission for some reason, you should be able to use a different non-published version if you need to. And if you do, you need to reference the published version. If you get stuck with permissions, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Effectively, your ideas are yours, but if you're reproducing something that's been published by a publisher, you need to ask the publisher, and they will normally say yes, that's fine. If it's being published in if a journal article is being published as part of an edited collection of a book, a journal publisher will normally say yes, that's fine. If you get stuck, send an email to admin@cambridgescholars.com and we will try and help. I mentioned this word discoverability before, so let me just talk about this again because this is really, really important today. It was back when I was young and doing my first degree. Discoverability meant walking into a library and walking down the shelves until you found a title that looked interesting, and possibly asking a librarian. Discoverability nowadays involves searching for keywords, and the keywords are normally contained in what we call metadata. So metadata is data about data. Metadata is a description of what's in the book. So metadata includes title, the author, the abstract or short description, and the author's description. So the abstract, what we call an abstract in a journal article or a blurb in a book, which is a short description, that has all the keywords which describe your book. So if I'm looking for a book on corporate social responsibility, I should be able to put in social responsibility as a keyword, and find metadata which describes a book about corporate responsibility. So give us a nice descriptive title. So if somebody's looking down the titles list, they can see a title that looks about right. Put the important words about your book into the blurb, into the abstract. Give us a short biography that says who you are, why you're an appropriate person to have written or edited this book. Really importantly, and Jamie at CSP can help with this and can talk about this. Find someone to do a review of your book and give us reviews which we can publish. If we get a nice review of the book, it goes on the website right next to your book. So if somebody's looking at for your book on the website and they hit that, they find a review next to it, and that encourages them to read or to buy your book. So discoverability is really important. Make your book discoverable. Increasingly, and this is particularly the case over the last 12 to 18 months since we had the COVID pandemic, increasingly academic libraries buy books as ebooks. They still buy hard copy books, but increasingly they buy as ebooks. So what do we do for marketing your book? We, like Cambridge Scholars, like every other academic publisher, asks its authors to help with marketing. So we say, if you've published a book, let as many people know as you can. Put it on your social media. So put it on Twitter or WeChat or whichever social media platform you use. Recommend your book to your institutional librarian. Recommend your book to places with talk courses or research centers. You're the person who knows your field much, much, much better than we do. We're just publishers. We're not academic subject specialists. So we know an awful lot about publishing and not very much about academic specialist subjects. So you're the person who knows about your specialist subject area. So recommend your book to the right people in these areas. Find us some positive reviews from some credible people. Write a summary for your newsletter or your own or your website or your university's newsletter or website. If you have a look at this interesting link on Books in Focus, that's an area that, again, Jamie and his colleagues work through. That's a nice area to promote your, it's a nice area to promote your book. So to write a little bit about your interest in the area, why you wrote the book, why the book would be interesting. So it's a sort of do your own review. It's a really nice little feature, and we've got quite a lot of our books now carry a Book in Focus companion piece. That's something we ask our authors to do, not something we do. But again, Jamie and team can guide you on how to best do that. If you want to go beyond authorship, here are some things you might want to get involved in. Advisory board positions, being a peer reviewer, being an editor of an edited collection. If you are part of a research group or a research center, if you supervise PhD students, encourage them to adapt the thesis for publication. If you go to a conference, encourage the conference organizers to select some of the best papers for publication as an edited collection. We love to create author communities. It's one of the things we do as publishers. We like to help build author communities and encourage author engagement. So again, please feel free to get in touch with us. admin@cambridgescholars.com is the best way of doing that. So for any ideas in this area, then please feel free to get in touch. Finally, before I hand back to Mary, let me just say, for any further information or any questions, which we'll try and answer some questions at the end of this presentation, but any that you're left unanswered, talk to us at admin@cambridgescholars.com. ecppc@inspiries.com. There are lots and lots of resources on the Cambridge Scholars website. It's a really rich area of resource. So have a look on the Cambridge Scholars website. You can find there's a really nice online magazine called No Shelf Required, which is published out of the US and Europe. And we've got several features about Cambridge Scholars, a couple of those that I wrote, and a couple of profile pieces on Cambridge Scholars. So have a look at noshelfrequired.com. That, as I say, it's really aimed at librarians, but there are some nice feature pieces there about Cambridge Scholars and some of my thoughts. So. Okay, good. Let me stop there. Let me thank you all for your attention, and I'm going to hand back to Mary, if I may. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a few We have a few questions coming up, and I have a few slides that I like to share with you, and I think it's relevant based on the questions that we got so far. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for a little bit before we go on to questions. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or yeah, while this is going on. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So a little bit on editing and proofreading. So we are talking about, we have a question. I'm just gonna do a little sneak preview on the Q&A asking about translation. So if you have a product, you have a book that was recently in another language other than the English language, you can translate it, edit it, and proofread it. And there's a few steps you have to go through from translating into editing and proofreading it into a publication ready English format, which is a bit different than oral and speaking English. Uh, so I have an example here. This is a screenshot of a academic editing service based in the UK. This is a partner that Cambridge Scholar Press works with. I just want to do a little bit of intro on what an academic editor would look like. For example, on this homepage, we would see that they offer specialty in humanities and physical sciences. So I would recommend, based on your professional academic background, you find an editor or a proofreader that is in your area of expertise. For example, someone who knows how to write and edit in the sciences and medical would be a different kind of format than editing for humanities subject. Here, the editorial also have a little bit of knowledge on how to edit academic writing in academic, and also do a little bit of minor research. That's the last paragraph, last line of the last paragraph there. A little bit of research without having to raise questions with each author, because what happens with during the editorial step is that a lot of things there's going to be three-way communication, four-way communication between the author, the editor, maybe the translator, and also with CSP. And as the time goes on, when there's page layout involved, you will also need to talk to the page layout people. So there's multiple editorial processes and communication collaboration going on. So just so that you know, a little bit of time and effort needs to be put into the editorial and proofreading process. Permissions. This is the permissions to reuse a book content from either from another publisher or from maybe an academic journal or proceeding or from the university. So here is a little bit of what I did in the past. I have blocked out sensitive or non-relevant words into that star format. But I guess you can see the general idea. Is, for example, you would need, if you have, let's say, 12 chapters or 8 chapters into a book, then each chapter you might have taken it from a previous academic paper or proceeding, or from something you've published on the website for the school or for another publisher, a journal. So what happens in a permissions request procedure is that it will be very good to put that on an Excel spreadsheet. So you have the items that you require to permission, right? Detailedly explained, and also find out who the copyright holder is. For example, it could be, just top of my head, it could be McGraw-Hill Publishing. It could be Oxford University Press. So it could be Springers, Verlag. So you have all these different publishers that have published your material in a journal format. So you take in these and you ask their permissions department for permissions. And you tell them that you are the author and you would like to use certain chapters or a whole chunk of the material in a new book. So you apply for status and then wait for their reply back. Best if it's in a written format, of course. And if it's something that it's done from the school or it's done from a place that doesn't have a formal permissions a letter to give you, I have just briefly jot down on the wording that you could use. So it could be so-and-so journal hereby grant you the non-exclusive rights to reproduce this content and so forth. And you could do it in a bilingual language as well. So yeah, that's my quick four slides for you. I'm gonna stop share right now. Okay. Let's see questions. So John, is it okay just start reading the questions?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. Question number 1. Will CSP be interested in publishing a book from translation from the same author in another language, or should it always be written from the ground up for CSP? Or
No,
written in the English language for CSP?
yeah, no, it's a good question. We quite often publish books which were initially published in another language, and again, it's something that it's something we're always very pleased to look at. I'm going to come back to your permissions word again, Mary. The most important thing we can do, if it's been published by a publisher, even if it's in a different language, then the publisher needs to give permission. So please tell the publisher that you're intending to have the book translated and published in English, and I'm sure it's they will normally say yes, that's fine. But yes, we're very pleased to look at translated books.
Okay. Yes, you've answered that question, and in the chat box, the questioner, our guest with the question says thank you. So second question, in the field of arts, there's often personal practice involved connected to the content of the writing or the outcome of writing, even if it's not a academic PhD paper. It's not in a memoir format. So what is the level of expecting it as a academic writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this, I guess, is where the judgment of a publisher needs to be exercised. I wish I could give you a clear answer, and I absolutely can't. If you think about think about the audience, so think about students and researchers, and what is the level? The level is if it's going to be, if your personal practice or your personal reflections are going to be relevant to a researcher or valid, are able to be quoted by another researcher, then it's probably okay. So I guess it's about what is the function of what part does the personal side play. it's a genuinely interesting question, and I'd love to have a clear answer, and I don't. So, as I say, think about the audience is probably the best guidance I can give you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have a response to say that it should be relevant to the demand. So that's a response. How to know who the audience is? Any advice on the publishing? That's another question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the audience will be for an academic book. It will normally go through an academic, what we'll call a supply chain. It will go into, it'll mostly go into either academic bookstores or into academic libraries or into research libraries. So it will go into a university library. So your audience is already restricted mostly to people who use academic libraries. Now, if you are a researcher if you're a researcher in linguistics, there's an awful lot of books in an academic library that are not relevant to you. So a book on romantic French architecture is probably not relevant. So if you're so think about your subject area. And think about, so if you're writing a book on this is Hun Hun, what is your, can you tell me what's your field of interest?
All right. Well, we're getting answer from that. I have a question.
Okay.
You've mentioned the word blurb. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure most people don't know what a blurb is. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. It's if you think about anybody who's written an academic journal article will have to write an abstract. Mm-hmm. So an abstract is a short version of the article. So it says in 50 words or 100 words, this was the purpose of my article, this is what it covers, these are the main conclusions. A blurb does a very similar thing, but with a book. So it says, this is what the book's about, this is the area that it covers, these are the sort of main conclusions. It's not like a novel where, it's not like a mystery story where you don't want to give away the ending. With an academic book, if you found a new interpretation of a novel, then say that this is an interesting new interpretation of Wuthering Heights or of so give away the ending. So a blurb is just a description. It's like an abstract. Mm-hmm. If you look on the back, pick up any academic book in a library or in your collection and look at the description, or go onto the Cambridge Scholars website and just have a look at any of the book descriptions on there. That will tell you, I'll give you a good indication. But again, think about discoverability and think about metadata. So one of the things that you need to put in your blurb, in your abstract, are words which will describe your content. Yeah. I think we're still waiting for Hun Hun there, but oh, here we go. Political science. Thank you, David. So who are your, how to get to know who your audience are, any advice? If your interest area is political science, so let's think about this library again. And it doesn't have to be, don't think about a physical library, think about a virtual library. Think about a search engine. So think about the kinds of people who would be looking for books on political science using a search engine. So who might that appeal to? Students of political science. Is this too obvious? It's okay if it's too obvious. Just tell us who are the key people who would be interested in this. if we're looking at particularly at political science with reference to case studies in China, then say it's going to be relevant to people with an interest in China. So it won't be relevant to musicians. So don't say everyone. Your audience isn't everyone. Your audience isn't a musician. If you've written a book about political science, your audience is people who are interested in political science. Now, they might be students of politics, they might be students of economics, they might be students of international business or international affairs. So you can think a little wider. Think about some of the specialist research institutions. So who have specialist schools? Where are the best scholars? Where are the research institutes? So think about those kind of issues. That does what we do when we market a product. So if we're looking at selling a product to people interested in a healthy lifestyle, we'll try and identify what sort of people are those, what do they read, what do they think about, what else do they buy. So it's just really sort of a little bit of marketing work. So yeah, think about the people around your subject area. That will help us and will help you present your book more carefully to the right author, the right audience. The last thing we want to do, and this will be a really bad outcome, is if you have written a book about, this is a stupid example, so forgive me, if you've written a book about political science and you call it A History of Music, people who are interested in a history of music will say, oh, this looks interesting, and they might buy that, or they might download it and start reading it and say, no, this isn't about music at all, it's about political science. So don't give it the wrong description. Don't try and mislead, and don't make it something that it isn't. Make it something that it is, and be pleased and proud of that.
Okay. So I have another question.
Sure.
So say that our participants right now, a large number of them have something on their, they have a manuscript, they have a partial manuscript, they have an idea of inkling of what to publish. What should they prepare in priority? What is the most important thing that they need to do right now? And what are some of the priorities they need?
Okay. Well, I would say actually the most important thing you can do is go onto the website and download a proposal form. And whether you're submitting to Cambridge Scholars or to Routledge or to Wiley or to any other academic book publisher, go and find a proposal form, download it, and start filling it in, because that will take you through all the questions. That will help you organize your thoughts. So the proposal form will ask you the questions that a publisher needs to have answered in order to be able to publish them. So yes, a book proposal form. I can put the, Jamie or Beck, can you put a link on there to the proposal form, please? That's a really good way just to organize your thoughts. Because again, it takes you through in a very systematic way. You know, it says, tell us about you. It says, tell us about your book. It says, give us one sentence about your book. So, you know, give us 200 words about your book, but actually describe your book in one sentence. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It says, what other books are in this field? What else has been published? How is your book different from the other books that have been published? And if you don't have the answers to those, then it kind of forces you to think, oh, actually, yeah, okay, that's a good point. I need to think about how my idea is going to be different from this book that sounds quite similar. So it's a good way. That's a really good way of prioritizing your thoughts. Is use the proposal form to organize your thoughts.
What is the percentage? Sorry, one more question from me. What is the percentage of authors coming from domestically and internationally for CSP?
I would say probably our most frequent, our most the author nationality we publish the most is from the US.
Mhm.
So the majority are from outside of the UK. So although it's British based, domestically maybe 20%. We are very, very deliberately an academic publisher, not a British publisher who has a little bit, sorry, an international publisher, not a British publisher that will occasionally look at, you know, books from outside the UK. It's very, very definitely an international publisher. So I would say maybe 20%, 25% are our home market, and the rest are from outside.
Okay. Good. I think that's all the questions I have. I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Does the CSP colleagues have anything to add?
You need to, oh, there you go.
I was just going to add a little point to John's point before concerning blurbs. Because the thing with blurbs are that they're a highly effective tool for quickly communicating the content of a book and what the book aims to achieve. But it is within a very limited format. And that's one of the reasons that we implemented the Book in Focus series, so that authors have an opportunity to say a little bit more than is possible through a blurb in their own words, and expand on a few points that maybe require a little bit more development. So we end up having the Book in Focus blog, which can be a highly effective marketing tool alongside the blurb. And then within that, it's kind of a nice sort of, how would you say?
A cumulative representation of the work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, good. Why don't you post the link to Book in Focus as well, guys? I think that'll be a really good idea.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I just want to add on to that blurb thing, because I know it's very important marketing wise. And another way of looking at it is an elevator pitch. For example, you're in the elevator, you meet someone, you know, you meet a colleague, and you want to tell them that you have this new book. So in 5 minutes, you know, from floor 10 to ground floor, quickly in 3 minutes, what would you say about this new book? And that's what you put in the blurb.
Yeah, that's a great way of summarizing it, Mary. It's yeah, it's really useful.
And kind of further to that, in a similar sort of way, I often, when I'm discussing a Book in Focus piece with authors, I'll say, imagine you had 10 to 15 minutes at an academic conference to introduce your book. What would be the key points that you talked about? What would you want to discuss? What would you want to make sure people were aware of? So that's a kind of nice lead on there with the elevator pitch to the short presentation.
Yes, yeah, it's the elevator pitch or the conversation over dinner, isn't it? It's
really.
Okay, anything else? Have we covered everything? I know in the chat we say if you have any more questions, feel free to contact by email. And this we've recorded, so this will be available for you afterwards when we've collected the files. And that's it from my end.
Sorry, Mary. I think we'll put it on the Jamie and Rebecca. We'll find somewhere to put this on the Cambridge Scholars site as well. Eh? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
So I just want to thank John Peters. Thank you, Mr. Peters, very much for your presentation today. And thank you for Jamie and Rebecca from CSP.